Ladies and gentlemen, you now have to pay for your supper. I'd like now to introduce Andrew Gatesy, the CEO with ANZ of International and Institutional Banking, to formally address our guest speaker tonight, Sam Walsh. Andrew.
So I have an incredibly difficult job tonight, which is to introduce Sam Walsh to a room full of mining executives. So it's not going to be that tough to do, I hope. Before that, I just want to say how proud ANZ is to be a supporter of the Melbourne Mining Club. It's an important organization for us. It shows our... Wow, they're getting quiet on that side of the room. Do you know, when I was doing my walkabout, I discovered that this side of the room was the coolest side of the room. This side of the room was competing with cool, but this side was actually the warmest section of the area. So drink up here in the middle of this area, right up in here. The rest of you don't have any excuses. Obviously, the past few months, we've seen some improvement in prices and maybe a little bit of coming back, particularly in iron ore. But I know that we've got a lot of challenges in the mining industry. And as your banker, I know the challenges which you face, and we want to continue to support you during these difficult times. I'm going to have Sam come up and do a talk later on, talk about the state of play of the industry, and I had the job of trying to figure out what to talk about Sam. So I went back, I looked at the bio on Sam. So Sam grew up in Brighton, not UK, but a suburb of Melbourne, which for those of you is a bit of a surfing community. So imagine Sam surfing for a moment. Just hold that thought into your head just for a moment. He was one of 5 children, Sam. At 15 years old, his father died. So a landmark event, and this was at a stage in life where his mother didn't know what a checkbook looked like. So Sam had to take over the household finances. He went to Brighton Grammar. He then went to Melbourne University, where he graduated. As you all know, he had a great industry in the great experience in the automotive industry, in both Nissan and General Motors, where he rose to very senior level executives. And then in 1991, he joined Rio Tinto. And we all know what he's doing now. Now, what else does he do besides being the CEO of Rio Tinto? Well, last week, or the week before last, Sam and I were at the Australian-India CEO Forum, where he's the chair of that. He's also co-chair of the B20 Anti-Corruption Task Force. He does a number of community things, not the least of which is a trustee of the Royal Opera House here in London, but he's also been on the Chamber of Arts and Culture of Western Australia. Now, there's a long list of his honors and accomplishments, but I'm going to try and be brief. One is a Western Australian Citizen of the Year of Industry and Commerce. He received the Officer in the General Division of the Order of Australia in 2010. He has 2 honorary doctorates of commerce. He got the Richard Pratt Business Art Leadership Award. He got the Knight Commander of Grace, Sovereign Order of St. John of Jerusalem. Now, I tried to Google that afterwards, but I think he's the only winner of that one. Now, recently, AusIMM have given him an award, which is that in recognition of his high standing in the minerals industry, Sam was recently named as the 2015 recipient of AusIMM's Institute Medal, the most prestigious award conferred by AusIMM, first awarded in 1935 of his recognition. Now, all of these honors show that Sam is doing a few things right, but probably the best thing that he did right was to marry Leanne. And Leanne is here with us tonight, so I'd like to welcome Leanne for this evening's event. So as Sam, we're looking for you now to inspire us with your wit and wisdom. Thank you all.
Thanks very much, Andrew, for that. I was a bit worried that actually your introduction was going to be longer than my speech, but fortunately you wrapped it up. You must have been getting the evil eye. Now, I should comment, because I know that a few journalists here have actually got a preliminary copy of my speech. This is the abridged version, you'll be pleased to hear. So instead of the 2 hours and 20 minutes, I've cut it down to 15 minutes. course, journalists being journalists, they said, well, that's going to allow more for questions. Hopefully Ian will control the audience for me. But to the many distinguished guests, Alexander Downer, High Commissioner for Australia to the UK, Tim Pallas, Victorian Treasurer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be here with you tonight. Now, can the people down there hear me? I've heard that it's sort of, yeah, okay. And the people down the other end? Good. Now, I have attempted to include a few sporting jokes, cricket jokes, but I've got to explain that I don't have a sporting bone in my body. Sorry about this, Rodney. I mean, of course, looking at me, you could have guessed that anyway. But please, as I say the jokes, could you please laugh? You know, just to give some encouragement along the way. I actually think that I am the only Melbourne-born boy to address the Melbourne Mining Club here at the historic Lord's Cricket Ground. Now, my very, very sporting colleague, Chris Lynch, over on table 37, our CFO, now he's sporty, and he likes to remind us that he's actually played both on the hallowed turf of the Melbourne Cricket Ground and here at Lord's. However, what he doesn't say is, well, he had to pay to play here, but it was for a good cause. Sorry about that, Chris. Now, it's customary at Rio Tinto to acknowledge the traditional owners, and I would like to pay my respects to the first Australians to play cricket in the UK in 1868. They were from the Wimmera district of my home state of Victoria. That match was 10 years before a Colonial 11 took on W.G. Grace here at Lord's in a match completed in just under 5 hours. Now, Rod, I think that probably even beats your record. In fact, I must compliment the MMC for hosting this dinner on the hottest day in the year to date with somewhat dodgy air conditioning. I am half tempted to finish right now while I'm still ahead. But I will make a few comments. Well, for all of us, it's been quite a fascinating year so far. Now, for the journalists here, that's sort of code for, you know, pretty bloody tough year. There's been a lot of commentary. There's been free expert advice. And even some sledging has come our way in the industry. With a history stretching back to around the time of those early matches, Rio Tinto people know what it takes to play a long and quality innings, as many of you do in this room. So even so, there's no doubt in our industry faces a number of challenges. Some real, some are perceptions, and some are outright illusion. And under this kind of scrutiny, and sometimes misconception, I strongly believe that we as an industry must reach out to reconnect and reframe our industry. And this is even more important when times are challenging for a number of us. So tonight I'd like to talk about how Rio Tinto sees the game evolving, how we should be true to open economies and open markets. We should be confident of the strong long-term demand drivers that are still very much with us. That we need to change the way that we approach social licence, and we need to remind investors, a lot of investment bankers here today, of our long-term value. So let's look at the state of play. It has been a challenging time, not only for our industry, but also for many others in both hard and soft commodities, be it iron ore or coal, be it steel or aluminium, oil and gas, or sugar and wheat for that matter. Some have called it a crisis of confidence and talked themselves and others into gloom. It's even been suggested to me that there's a direct correlation between your position in the cost curve and the volume of your opinion. The higher on the curve, the louder that you get. Now, for the journalists in the room, that of course wasn't aimed at anybody in particular. I thought I was being very sensitive, tactful. The industry cycles have caught some unprepared, others looking for answers. There also seems to be a view that you can talk the markets into submission or bend reality to suit your will. Some even question the invisible hand of the market. In times of economic uncertainty, it might sound seductive or comforting to want to put up the barriers, but we as an industry must keep the markets open and trade open. It's worth remembering in Australia, for a quarter of a century, iron ore exports were banned. There was a fear that there was not enough iron ore in Australia to meet the demands of our steel industry. But look at the wealth created since the artificial barrier was lifted. In the past 8 years alone, iron ore has contributed $70 billion Australian dollars in royalties and corporate taxes. And Treasurer, I'm sure some of that landed in Victoria. It's not only earned the country billions of dollars, it's helped transform a previously European-focused nation to a key trading partner with Asia. Now, of course, a rising tide lifts all boats. When things are good, public support is high. When the cycle changes, and we all know that it's a cyclical industry, criticism inevitably follows. And such criticism is often based on the tension that our focus in our industry is long term. But we have a world that's fixated on the short term. That was for the investment bankers, if in case they didn't get the message there. But if you've been around long enough, you get used to such cycles. You don't dismiss them, you anticipate, and you act with them. And by, I think Rio Tinto has done exactly that. This has meant that today we have one of the strongest balance sheets in the industry. But of course, we can't be complacent. As an industry, we need to be very careful of the signals that we send to our customers, our host governments, and our communities. And taking the industry down risks becoming a negative feedback loop. It feeds public anxiety about our industry's crucial role. It feeds a narrative that we're of a previous century, not this century. And that's because returning to a new industry norm still requires from us significant supply response. It provides us to provide the opportunity to our shareholders to deliver decades of value to shareholders, to our partners and communities. I'd like to echo the sentiments of fellow Melbourneian and Zinc Corporation founder, W.S. Robinson. He noted, "Experience proves garlands are not distributed for pessimism." I share his optimism. The twin drivers of modernity and prosperity give us every reason for confidence. So for those mired in pessimism, let's reflect for a moment on the drivers of demand. Pay attention to this. Rodney's into statistics, so he'll be noting this. By 2050, the world's population will increase by a third. Africa's population will double. Within a generation, India will overtake China's population. And urbanisation is not slowing, it's continuing at pace. By 2050, another 2.5 billion people will move to an urban environment. And it's clear these forces of prosperity and development will require more infrastructure. The B20, the business group linked to G20, estimate that more than $57 trillion of infrastructure will be needed in the next 15 years. So you may wonder about the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. You may wonder about the new Silk Road. You may wonder about One Belt, One Road. It's all about putting part of this infrastructure in place. The rest of the world needs to do it, and guess what? You need the commodities that we supply to be able to do exactly this. So there is a sizable infrastructure deficit. And for those who are concerned about China's moderating growth, keep in mind, China's economy will grow more in the next 10 years than it has in the past 25 years. India's economy will almost double, albeit most likely initially less commodity intensive than China, but in dollar terms equivalent to what China has just achieved in the past 8 years. So iron ore, metallurgical coal will remain the building blocks of urbanisation and industrialisation. Aluminium will continue to be at the centre of transport and consumer needs. And copper, well, it was with humanity in the Bronze era, and so it will be in the silicon and solar era. Some examples. A conventional car uses 15 kilograms of copper. A fully electric car uses 4 times as much. And if you factor in society's power needs, it's clear that the world will need a lot more copper. The industry faces a supply gap of 4 to 6 million tonnes per annum within a decade. So we can safely assume the world will need many more Oyu Tolgois. So Jean-Sébastien, in charge of copper at Rio, would you get a move on? So the demand signals are strong and clear. We will grow year by year to meet humanity's needs. It's a trend that is not cyclical, is the public's ever-increasing expectations. Retaining our stakeholders' confidence is a challenge for all of us. Without it, we have limited growth both in emerging markets and in our operating heartlands. 20 years ago, Rio Tinto's chief executive, Leon Davis, outlined the new competencies required in our industry. He said there's a risk that, and I quote, consistent failure to win broad public support for one's activities will handicap a business or an industry and lead to eventual demise. He talked about the new thinking that was required 20 years ago, working with our teams, working with our people, working with traditional owners, working in developing economies, and with the environmental lobby. We think that these challenges are new or fascinating challenges that we've just faced. They've been around for a long time. Now, since Leon's speech, the industry has made great strides, but we've all got to do more. On each one of those points, there are some elements that I'd like us to consider. Let's start with our people. We offer many modern career opportunities in the soft skills and hard skills. We all recognise the need to build a more diverse and inclusive business to better reflect our host communities. And as an industry, our diversity statistics are simply not where they need to be, and we need to do more. And keeping our people safe has become an absolute number one goal. On safety, the raw statistics do point to large improvements, but the raw truth is that fatalities and injuries still occur. 0 fatalities must be our baseline, not the stretch target. It's what the public expect of us. It's in fact what the investors expect of us, and it's what we should expect of ourselves. In working with traditional owners, Rio Tinto led the way in Australia. And I'd like to believe that we've taken those competencies to new regions and countries, but of course with different emphasis. And I'm not saying that we've not faced challenges and will not continue to face challenges. We will. But when I look at new projects, such as the Oyu Tolgoi project, get a move on JS, where 95% of our workforce is Mongolian, I'm greatly encouraged. Since Leon's speech, what has changed is a broad range of stakeholders that we deal with. It's no longer enough just to engage with communities. We also need to evolve our capacity to involve and engage and partner with governments, development banks. We need to work better with civil society and social enterprises and with the environmental lobby. We now have greater transparency through tax initiatives such as the EITI, Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, and publishing our community commitments and publishing our environmental performance. Now it's a lot clearer to host governments, to civil societies, the role that we play in economic and social progress. And there's a lot of positives out there. It's just they're not always noticed. Last year, for example, at Rio Tinto, we supported 2,200 community-related programs. Far from token, they're very tangible. But we need to get better. We all need to get better at telling our story. We know that support for our industry is strongest at the local level, rather than with the general public. They have no familiarity or interaction with us, and this does make it hard for us at times. Our challenge is to disentangle genuine community concerns from broader public debates. Debates with those totemic labels as carbon, uranium, sustainability, the list goes on. And the infusion of human rights language into sustainability also poses additional challenges for us, but also for all industries, particularly when the issues that we seek to balance, or the occasional operational mistakes that we may make, they can be couched as violations, abuses, unethical behaviour. And such language denigrates the good work that we're doing. It denigrates our great people. And it can polarise discussion when we seek to find practical solutions to complex issues, whether they be carbon, whether they be working in emerging countries, or whether they are explaining our global tax arrangements. So what's the solution? Well, it probably won't surprise you that the solution is actually more transparency and continued engagement. Rather than push our critics away, we have to work constructively with NGOs and civil society and at the grassroots of our community. Railing against community attitudes does us a disservice. It can further entrench negative attitudes and with it burdensome over-regulation. Because many of the regulatory responses of late, rather than aiding decision makers, have increased community anxiety. They've delayed investment decisions to the detriment of all. So, whilst we've made significant progress 20 years after Leon's seminal speech, we can and we know we all need to do more. So I suggest that the competencies that we need to embrace have evolved to safe and diverse people, traditional owners and all stakeholders, emerging and emerged economies. I've talked about industry confidence and renewing our social licence setting, so what else should we focus on? In conclusion, I'd like to suggest we look to refresh our position as an industry to invest in. My suggestion is not directed at a company level, but at an industry level to better present our case. Our industry exhibits a wide range of the risk-reward profiles, from blue sky explorer to the centuries young, diversified producers. There'll be the lowly geared or the highly leveraged, those in a hurry and those focused on capital growth and dividends. But let's step back from that and consider the big picture for a moment. The industry's exploration spend is at a decade low. Industry capital spending is nearest its lowest in 30 years. Industry operating costs have clearly reduced and are falling. Prudence is good. But investing well for long-term returns is critical for shareholders. The current squeeze may well, in fact, be providing the next cyclical upswing. Given the demand outlook I painted earlier, we have every reason for the long-term confidence of our industry. Personally, I like the idea of costs continuing to fall, strong demand for our products, and the potential for price rises. The market is looking for us to unlock value through better management of our fixed assets, better management of our working capital, and using the skill of our highly talented people. Our industry is reinventing ourselves, as all industries do, through intensive competition, the adoption of new technologies, forging new partnerships and developing new markets. Not all can or will succeed, but we shouldn't let our industry be defined by fourth quartile failures. Any more in the IS&T industry, it shouldn't be defined by the once mighty Xerox or Kodak. All industries have to move with the times, and we should remind shareholders of our longevity, our dividends, and that our future is tied inextricably to human prosperity. An undeniable trend that despite temporary periods of slower advancement, it steadily marches on. It's human nature to seek comfort in certainty because there's so much that is uncertain about our industry, from geology to sudden market shifts to social attitudes. And we therefore look for artificial constructs of the mind or the regulatory kind to deny or slow change. But we as an industry must embrace change, for there can be no doubt that the world will continue to demand the metals and minerals that make modern life work. This is the certainty that we should all focus on. And we should reward those that are taking the long view and share in the wealth and knowledge that's being created, and which, by our actions, continue to make society a more prosperous place. Thank you very much for your attention and bearing the heat. It's been my absolute pleasure in sharing some thoughts with you tonight, and I'll be very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Sam. We have two roving microphones in the room, one manned by my colleague Gavin and one by my colleague Graham. So if you have a question, please make yourself known to them. When you get the microphone, please identify yourself and your affiliation, and please don't make a speech. We've got a guest speaker tonight, and guess what? It's not you. Okay, so questions are welcome, speeches are not. We have one.
Sam, Jason Kirkland, Bank of America Merrill Lynch. So, iron ore market looks a little bit oversupplied.
Sorry, is that a question or a statement?
Just wondering, do you feel any responsibility to bring some balance to the market? Sorry if I've asked you that before.
Oh boy. Thanks very much for that, Jason. It's great to see you and good to see all the people at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Good to have you here with us tonight. And look, let me just comment that the iron ore industry is actually a global industry. And iron ore comes from the four corners of the earth. Pricing is actually set by a spot market. We don't set the price. And it's a cyclical industry, and the advantage that we have is that our business is in the lowest cost quartile. It is the lowest priced iron ore. And that's a very privileged position. Some people think it's an accident that we got there. Let me assure you it's not. There's a lot of hard work, a lot of strategy, a lot of investment. And the projects that we're bringing on are a result of a $20 billion investment program that we started some 10 years ago. In fact, when I started in iron ore as CEO. It's important for us to continue to see the investment that we've placed come to fruition because we invest in the long term. And we're in fact investing for the very things that I was talking about in my speech. The fact that the world, as it continues to urbanise and industrialise, guess what? It's going to need what we supply. But let me just add to the comment that some people think, well, iron ore is kind of unique. Let me just assure you it's not. We're seeing the same cyclical trends with copper, with aluminium, with titanium dioxide, with a whole range of commodities, because this is the cyclical nature of our industry. And during times of adjustment, it's actually the high-cost producers that exit, not the low-cost producers. But thanks very much for your question. Sorry, I'm not sure what's happening here. Ian, you're righto. Ian, over here. Good.
Amber Plum from The Australian, Mr. Walsh. I'm just wondering, you've got X2 here tonight, you've got Glencore. Might there be a little chat about some coal assets later this evening?
Please don't call me Mr. Walsh. Even my grandkids call me Sam. So I'm actually wondering if my father is back here tonight. Look, there's a lot of speculation in newspapers, and I'm absolutely certain that helps move your product. I've made it public that if there's any of you out here who value any of our assets more than we do, and you've got an oversized checkbook, we'd be very pleased to sit down and talk with you. And that really covers any of our asset portfolio. Time will tell what exactly may come out in relation to heaven knows what. But I'll continue to read your articles and continue to look for insights, and I just hope during tonight you've had a good conversation with X2 and Glencore so I can find out what they're thinking.
Sam, I'm Ben Stojkovic from Greenpeace, and I want to know how you're going to deal with the backlash against thermal coal.
Yeah, look, the fundamentals of energy production is that coal is going to be needed 50 years or more. And for those of you who feel, well, maybe thermal coal is not the way we should be going, I just hope you sit at night with the lights out, with a candle, as you try and read your newspaper or read whatever. Now, there are issues, I understand, in relation to using the cleanest coal that you can, and that's what we provide. Also looking for technical solutions to further improving coal. And part of the agenda when we were in India was actually hearing CSIRO talk about the work that they're leading in relation to coal sequestration and other projects that they're working on to help the industry. But for those of you that think, well, solar is going to do the job, or wind power is going to do the job, or hydro is going to do the job, I mean, you really need to wake up to that and realise that, yes, they certainly play their part, but certainly for the long term, it's going to have to be a combination of energy sources to actually meet our needs. Do we have another question?
So down this way. We call this mid-wicket or deep mid-wicket, Sam.
Oh, there we go.
Down near the Dunnies.
That's a long way down.
Hi, Sam. Emma Den Hollander, Rio Tinto here.
Oh, a friendly question, I hope.
Thank you for the speech. During your speech, you mentioned that one of the issues the industry faces is diversity. And I think given that yourself and other people in the room acknowledge that diversity is an issue, I'd just like to hear your thoughts on how we're going to tackle that going forwards.
Yeah, look, Emma, it's a really good question, and it is a question for all of us. Sorry, that was not meant to be funny. It's a problem we've got. If you look at our businesses, certainly for those that are international, and Rio's in 45 countries, if you look at our business, as I mentioned, Mongolia, 95% of our people are Mongolian. So we get it right at an operating and working level. It's when you get up to senior management that we have the problem. And it's an issue in terms of providing the opportunities, but I think the biggest issue we've got is in the terms of inclusion. And some of you are going to say, what the hell are you talking about? Well, inclusion is ensuring that once you actually have hired a diverse candidate, that person of whatever background feels included and feels part of the action, and their judgment, their value, their experience, their skills is actually taken advantage of. And if you look around the audience tonight, and I say with all due respect, white, Anglo-Saxon male, including myself, we are not representative of the general population. And that's an issue that we need to take advantage of. We need to bring diverse employees through the organisation. And there are some seriously good examples. You know, Schlumberger, for example, the oil service provider. When you meet with them, table like this, it's like meeting with the United Nations. They have people from every single possible nationality sitting around the table, male, female, different origins, and they represent their business. They represent the various countries that they're involved in. So, I mean, a key issue, Emma, for us is to actually take advantage of the talent out there, particularly in the area of male-female, because quite frankly, for those of us like me that have 18% female in our workforce, you know, we're missing out of 32% of the talent that's out there. That's a competitive advantage if we can take advantage of that. But thank you. They're exhausted.
I think we've exhausted.
They just want another drink, that's all.
Well, actually, Sam, I've got one.
Oh, Gavin, this wasn't the deal.
It's a question that Richard Burrows, the chairman of the mining club, was dying to ask, but he's just too scared to ask.
No, I don't blame him.
He said to me, I'd really like to ask him, given his interests, that if we equate the current iron ore market to an opera, which opera would it be and why?
Look, I don't think that's a good analogy at all, because for those of us that go to opera, we realise that it never finishes with a particularly happy story. Boy meets girl, they fall in love, one or both actually die by the end of the opera. But look, I think that looking at the iron ore story, it will have a happy ending. It is a highly prospective industry for us to be involved in. As I say, the fundamentals of urbanisation, industrialisation will need more steel. If you look at the $57 trillion of investment in infrastructure that's required, most of that is going to be steel and the commodities we supply. So there's always a tendency when you are looking down a trough to be negative about it, to look at all of the pessimism and everything that's out there. But you can also look at it and saying, it's sowing the seeds for the next recovery. And that's exactly what's going on. So iron ore will recover. I'm not sure what the new normal means. I've heard Chinese leaders talk about it, and every time I go to China, I hear a slightly different version. I think new normal is more about a destination rather than necessarily a journey, because you can't suddenly convert China from being 52% consumer goods, consumer services, to 100% consumption-led. So there has to be a transition. And when I last heard Li Keqiang, the Premier of China, talk about this, he mentioned the fact that, yes, there's going to be a move to further consumption. And guess what? Cars need steel and copper and aluminium, and refrigerators use it, and washing machines and air conditioners and power lines. And so consumption is not all bad for us. But importantly, he also said that there's going to be a need for further infrastructure spending, and, to use his words, rehabilitation of shanty towns, code for further urbanisation, industrialisation. I'm actually far more positive about the second half in China than, in fact, a lot of the industry is. And that's as a result of the confidence that I have in the leaders of China. It's as a result of strategic decisions they've made in relation to interest rates and housing rules and so on, but also in terms of what China is actually doing in relation to infrastructure spend. And there's no uncertainty that the new Silk Road, One Belt, One Road, Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, it's all aimed at pulling commodities, pulling steel through the Chinese industry. And that's going to be good for us. Do we have...
Just down here at the end, it's what we call short square ring.
Thanks, Sam. Rosalind from Women in Mining. You're saying that you'd like to include more women in your business. I'm wondering what we as women in mining can do to help you and the other CEOs who are here to do that.
Yeah, look, one of the biggest challenges with, and of course I'm not generalising here, but one of the biggest challenges is, you throw a job opportunity at a bloke, and a bloke says, oh yeah, I can do that. I'm terrific. I've got all the background. I know exactly what I should do. You throw the same opportunity at a woman, and well, I don't exactly. Well, I've never done that before, and it'd be a huge stretch, and what have you. Now, I'm not saying you should lie in your applications. Certainly not. No man would ever do that. But you do need to recognise that, gentlemen do stretch the facts a little bit. And I think, quite frankly, the women here, you need to have more confidence in your own ability to adapt, your ability to be resilient, your ability to be flexible and responsive to a new challenge, and you need to take a risk. We need to take a risk as well in terms of trusting you in that role. But at Rio, we do have a cadre of women who are coming through the business, and they will be a strong part of the new senior management of the business. I'm absolutely convinced. And Emma, who we heard earlier, she's certainly an example of that. But thank you very much for your question. If you want to talk to me about a job, just let me know. Good.
Stay up. Thanks, Sam, and thanks to everyone for the questions. I'd just like to invite Patrick Smith from AMC and John Murray from Swan Global to come up and offer a formal vote of thanks.
Well, before we lose you, there's a matter of housekeeping that I wish to bring to your attention. Thank you. Just a very important matter of housekeeping. Any of you who wish to take a photograph of Sam with his coat off have got about 3 minutes. Many of you who know Sam will realise that he rarely ever does that. So, Sam, yes. And I don't think we're charging, are we?
No charge.
Ladies and gentlemen, very short speech. Let's thank Sam Walsh very much for a terrific speech.
Oh, wow. Isn't that fantastic?
That's a miner's lamp inscribed for Sam. He complained about getting another miner's pick, so we decided to change it.
No, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thanks, Sam.
Well done. Thank you both. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
That was a good event. I enjoyed it.
Finish this off.
Good. Thanks, Ian.
Okay, thanks everybody. Just very briefly before we get back into the beer and the talking, thanks. If I could just have your attention for one last little minute. It's great that the Melbourne Mining Club could come here and demonstrate that we've taken over Lords. It's also interesting to note that in the room tonight we've got the managing director of a little company called Wolf Minerals, which is actually about to open the UK's first new metal mine in 45 years, done by a little Aussie miner from Australia. So thanks for that. just in relation to tonight, there's more information on the Melbourne Mining Club on our website. You can Google us up and find that. The audio link to this presentation and Sam's presentation tonight will be posted on our website shortly. Cameron Young from Boardroom Radio Media is here tonight, and you can save that for posterity if you'd like. If you would like to stay on and enjoy your dessert, that'd be wonderful. There's plenty more drinks and a lot more fun and conviviality to be had over the course of the evening. But for the rest of the night, until we come back next year, thanks again and travel safely.